What do Alec Baldwin, Ben Affleck, Robert Downey Jr., Anthony Hopkins, and Shia LaBeouf all have in common? They all hit rock bottom so hard that they had nowhere to look but up. And what they found there? They found God, and these stories will blow your mind. Alec Baldwin had it all figured out, or so it seemed. This guy was everywhere in the 90s and 2000s. Saturday Night Live, blockbuster movies. That voice that could sell you anything.
Let me guess. You're too busy to watch this ad. Just like you were too busy to invest in Bitcoin or Ethereum.
But behind all this charisma, there was total chaos. Baldwin grew up Catholic in a strict household, but by the time Hollywood got its hands on him, that faith was buried under layers of ego and ambition. According to him, the drinking started as a way to come down from the high of performing.
As a daily drinker, to my misery, boy, that was a tough time. There was really, really a lot of pain.
But soon enough, it became the only way he could function. And just when everyone thought it couldn't possibly get any worse, it escalated to harder stuff.
So I thought I was a genius. I thought I'm gonna stop drinking. I'm gonna switch to drugs. I mean, I don't say this to excuse it, I was doing that to fit in. That's the way it was back then. Everybody was drinking and drugging and doing this kind of stuff.
But then came the rock bottom moment, a moment he even talks about in his memoir.
But I know that at that time, and when I describe overdosing on drugs, which I've kept very private for years and years and years.
I have no idea what was happening. There's a pop inside my chest, then I black out. This moment shook Alec to his core, and so he made a choice that shocked everyone.
I got sober when I was just about to turn 27. I'm glad I got it when I did, because not many people get sober when they're young.
But he didn't do it because he had to. He did it because he surrendered. And in that surrender, something incredible happened. That quiet Catholic faith from his childhood came flooding back. Not the religious rules and rituals, but a real personal relationship with God.
I talk to God every day. God talks to me every day.
For years, he lived quietly, stayed sober, and kept his faith private. But then came the now infamous Rust incident, a tragic accident that put him back in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. The media went crazy. Everyone had an opinion, and Baldwin was at the center of a storm he never saw coming. But here's what's amazing. He didn't spiral. He didn't fight back or make excuses. Instead, he sat with that pain, even facing it head on despite scrutiny. And, most importantly, he mourned properly.
People, they have their dreams. No matter how old you are, you have your dreams.
Because when you've already walked through the valley of addiction, you tend to recognize sacred ground when you see it, even when it looks like tragedy. Robert Downey Jr.'s story is insane because he was literally born into chaos. His dad was an underground filmmaker who introduced him to drugs at the tender age of 6. So acting and addiction were part of the same world from day one.
And I took my comfort in being around the situation where, whether it was after hours and my dad was playing a poker game with pick a name of someone who was in that kind of world in the late 60s, to him and my mom trying to beat each other with what a funny one-liner was for this transitionary scene in a movie.
By his 20s, Hollywood called him a genius, but by his 30s, they called him unemployable. He did things like breaking into someone's house and then falling asleep in their bed while high, or skipping court-ordered rehab. And needless to say, he was getting blacklisted by every major studio. And the craziest part is that he didn't even want to stop. He was completely checked out, just riding the spiral down. That is, until one day while sitting in a jail cell, something completely shifted. Like a voice whispering, "There's another way." He started going to meetings, learning to sit still, all the while building structure where there had been none. Sure, it wasn't glamorous or fast, but it was real.
I was surprised to admit that when I was, locked down in a California correctional facility, I said, wow, this is really not panning out for me.
Downey talks about feeling some kind of force pulling him forward, sometimes through people, sometimes through failure, but always towards something better.
I always think of it as like this little super thin, invisible thread, but you can feel the tug and you just you have to be really gentle.
Now, this might actually be God he's talking about, but regardless, he followed this so-called thread out of addiction, out of jail, into fatherhood, and eventually into his second act as Iron Man. But here's the thing, he knows how fragile recovery is. He still catches his ego trying to sneak back in during moments of success. But the difference is now he knows how to name it and walk away. He meditates daily, trains consistently, and sticks to the routines that saved him. Not because he has to, but because he knows what happens when he doesn't. The truth is simple. You don't really ever beat addiction. Instead, you just learn to stop hiding from yourself. Ben Affleck was supposed to be the success story. Boston kid makes it big, wins an Oscar before 25, and then becomes Hollywood royalty. But success can be its own prison. One drink after work became 2, then 5, and then a terrible secret. He wasn't even partying by that point. He was medicating.
I started to drink more and more and more, and it was really hard for me to accept that meant I was an alcoholic.
And the worst part is that he knew where this was heading. His dad struggled with alcohol, and young Ben watched it tear their family apart.
For me, seeing my dad was just, he was drunk every day, and that was just life.
He swore he'd never repeat that cycle, but addiction doesn't care about your promises. And then, his own divorce hit him like a truck. Suddenly, he was trying to be a good dad while battling his own demons. He'd go to rehab, get clean, only to relapse again and again.
I was sober for a couple of years, and then I thought, I want to just drink like a normal person, and I want to have wine at dinner and so on. And I was able to.
The tabloids had a field day, but the real pain was in the mirror. Then came the moment that changed everything. His daughter saw him stumble, and in her eyes, he saw the same fear he'd felt as a kid watching his own father. And that broke him completely. So he decided to go public with his struggles.
The cure for addiction is suffering. You suffer enough that something inside you goes, I'm done. And I'm lucky because I hit that point before I lost really the things that were the most important, which were not my career or money, it was my relationship with my kids.
And in that brutal honesty, something shifted.
Demonstrate that you don't have to be defined by these issues. And I think the value, if there's value in me talking about being a recovering alcoholic, is that, that doesn't have to be who you are.
Today, Affleck moves differently. He's present with his kids, committed to his sobriety, and rebuilt his relationships from the ground up. Not perfectly, but authentically. The addiction that almost destroyed his family became the wake-up call that taught him how to truly love one. Anthony Hopkins never saw himself as a legend. He was just trying to survive his own mind. Growing up in Wales, he was always the weird kid.
All the other children seemed to know what was going on in the world, and I didn't. And I always felt very lonely. I didn't have any friends. I always played on my own, never played with the other kids.
Then acting became his language. Shakespeare made sense when nothing else did, and it worked because eventually he became one of Britain's most respected actors and then conquered Hollywood as Hannibal Lecter. But behind those iconic performances was a man drowning. He drank to disconnect from anxiety, pressure, and the constant feeling that he was a fraud. Then came 1975. He woke up in an Arizona hotel room, blackout drunk, with no memory of how he got there.
But then I realized I was in big trouble because I couldn't remember anything. And I was driving a car, drunk, out of my skull. Then on that fatal day, I realized I needed help. So I got it.
That's when he called a woman from AA who'd offered help. She asked him one simple question: why don't you just trust in God? That question cracked something open. Hopkins wasn't religious, didn't know theology, but from that day forward, he never drank again. We're talking almost 50 years of sobriety.
One thing I did realize that I was not unique. There are thousands of people around like me.
The further he walked from addiction, the closer he got to something else. And that's presence, real, genuine peace.
I feel every day as I get older anyway, is that it's all a miracle. I mean, my heart beats, lungs breathe. That is an extraordinary phenomenon.
He lives like someone who was rescued from the noise, from addiction, from the need to prove anything. Shia LaBeouf's story is the most intense because he literally ran out of options. This guy was the king of comebacks, bad headlines.
Hey Shia, do you have anything to say? Do you have anything to say about your arrest, Shia?
Rehabilitation, new role, public apology, repeat, but eventually the cycle broke. Allegations of abuse, rage-filled outbursts were burning every single bridge he'd built, and finally sitting alone with a gun in his lap, completely done with everything.
I had a gun on the table. I was out of here. I didn't want to be alive anymore. Shame like I had never experienced before. Kind of shame, you forget how to breathe.
But instead of pulling the trigger, he paused. And in that pause, he logged into an online recovery meeting. A stranger on the other side of the screen kept repeating one word: now, now, now. That single word cut through the chaos like a knife. His soul remembered it still existed.
I was holding on so tight to a life that I was slipping away through my hands, to 35 years of management, that the gospel gave me this invite to just let go.
He checked into rehab and left behind his phone, his image, everything. Sat with nothing but silence for weeks. Nobody visited and nobody called, until someone did. A quiet presence that refused to walk away, even when everyone else had given up. That presence saved his life, not by promising anything, but by simply staying. Then came the strangest invitation, to play Padre Pio in an independent film. LaBeouf moved into a real monastery, slept in a monk's cell, ate in silence, prayed with actual friars.
So I'd wake up in the morning, 9 a.m., I'd go to my meeting, and then 10 a.m. I'd be with Sister Lucia, and then 11 a.m. I'd be with Brother Jude.
And somewhere between prayer and pain, he met Christ. Not as an idea or ritual, but as a presence that simply said, I've been here the whole time.
And it feels like it's not being done to sell me on anything. And it feels almost like I'm being let in on something very special.
LaBeouf didn't become traditionally religious. He became desperate. And in that desperation, he found something deeper than self-help. He stopped asking why he suffered and started asking what the suffering could teach him. If these stories hit you where you live, drop a comment below. Have you ever had a rock bottom moment that changed everything? And if you want more incredible transformation stories, smash that subscribe button because we're just getting started. Thanks for watching, and remember, God is always on the move.